Hello and welcome to another episode of Every Possible Angle. Thank you so much for joining today. I'm very excited. In our headquarters, we have with us the vice president of the TGH Transplant Institute and the surgical director of liver transplant at Tampa General Hospital. Also, the national PI of the Guardian Liver Registry, Dr. Kiran Dhanireddy. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me, Michael. I'm glad to be up here in Boston.
It's great to see you again. I love being able to get to connect with you. And to start with, I always want to understand. We've worked together for a little while now, but I actually don't know this. How did you get into transplant? What was your story, your journey to get there?
Yeah, so it was not, in fact, a linear path to transplant. Being an immigrant kid whose father is a physician, you had one of two career choices, and I chose not to be engineer, so this left me with physician. And in medical school, I wasn't certain what I wanted to do. I was choosing between radiology and surgery, and um, actually, at the end of medical school, chose radiology.
Really?
hmm
Yeah.
But in your first year out of medical school, your internship, you have to either do medicine or surgery,
Hmm.
and then you go into your radiology training. And I chose to do surgery and got exposed to a lot of transplant at that time. This was at Georgetown in the early 2000s, and the program was just a few years old and very exciting time
Yeah.
to be on that service and had two uh, really remarkable surgeons that were there, Lint Johnson and Paul Koo, and sparked my interest. And so, really, I switched from radiology to a path to be a liver transplant surgeon and never looked back. Wound up spending 3 years at the NIH with Alan Kirk doing primate models of tolerance induction
Yeah.
and then trained at UCLA for transplant.
I'm always curious. I think there are those mentors or people of influence in our lives that just hit at the right moment. And can you tell a little bit about sort of that moment with these mentors that really shifted your passion?
Oh, there's a good
Yeah.
story because it's imprinted on me. I was an intern, and it was the maybe February of my intern year, so like 2/3 of the way through. And at this point, I was still on the path to
Yeah.
being a radiologist, and I was back on the transplant service for my third time around. And no, it wasn't intentionally punishment, but. Um, we had just finished rounds with the chief resident, and the interns all congregated to have breakfast when the chief residents went off to the OR before we started our daily work. And I get a page from the transplant operating room, and I call back thinking, rounds just ended like 20 minutes ago. What could I have possibly done wrong? And the nurse picks up the phone and says, Dr. Johnson wants you in the operating room right now. I'm like, oh, crap. So I go to the operating room and he tells me to scrub in, and he could never get my name right. He says, "Kiran, scrub in." So I scrub in, and he's doing a Whipple, and one of the first steps in a Whipple is to take out the gallbladder.
Mhm.
So he has me start taking out the gallbladder and proceeds to tell me that I will waste my life if I go into radiology, and suggests that perhaps the right path for me is to become a surgeon. And so then it scrambled my brain. I'm trying to like actually take out a gallbladder, which was a, a, a thing to do as an intern. That was a lot. And I went home and I thought about it for a couple of weeks, and
Yeah.
it just seemed to be the right thing. I had been reluctant at
Yeah.
that point to really move forward with signing my contract for my next year of residency training to be a radiologist, and so I gave up my spot, and they gave me a spot to be a categorical general surgery resident. And um, I, I doubt Dr. Johnson remembers this, but it was like a really pivotal moment in my life, and I've used that moment to think about how I can encourage my own trainees, the
Right.
medical students that I interact with, the residents that I interact with, to pursue what they're passionate about.
Absolutely. And to the point of he may not remember that moment. I think about that sometimes. There are these poignant moments in my own career that really stuck with me and shaped my path. But at the same time, I think about, okay, for those people that it might not have been significant, and now for me, sometimes some of my actions or the way I interact with junior staff, you have to think about, "Okay, this might be one of those moments where it will affect the trajectory for this person."
Well, as I've progressed in my career, I think the weight of that responsibility has been impressed upon me, right? So,
Right.
the more senior you are as a leader, the more intentional you have to be to show up in the way that is important to you as a reflection of who you are, and there are people watching. And it
Absolutely.
is the junior people in the room, the surgical intern, the third year medical student, whose ideas about what it means to be a transplant surgeon are going to be immeasurably influenced by my own behavior. Whether I want
Right.
it to be or
Right.
not, that is a responsibility that I take seriously.
And like every vocation, there are good days, there are bad days, there are hard days, and uh, it is true. Remembering to show up and remembering who you're influencing, I think that's such a big piece of it. And you are influencing quite a lot of people now. Leading the Tampa General Transplant Program, which is one of the fastest growing transplant centers and was the largest transplant program in the country last year. Congratulations. Um, how long have you been with Tampa now?
Uh, on July 9th, it'll be 7 years.
7 years. And
Yeah.
so this trajectory to grow to this point from 7 years ago, it's just incredible. Um, can you talk a little bit about what it takes as a leader to build a program and grow a program like this?
So, importantly, there was a rich tradition in transplantation at Tampa General before I arrived. And the first kidney transplant was done in 1974 there. The first successful heart transplant in the state of Florida was done at TGH in 1985. So, and if you look at the OPTN data, which started in 1988, we had the fourth largest kidney transplant program that
Right.
first year that publicly reported data were available. So this has been part of the DNA of the institution. And when I arrived in 2018, they were unclear about what the goals were, what the
Mm.
purpose was, what the value to the community was. And so I spent about 6 months getting to know the people.
Right.
There was a relatively new CEO at the time, John Corus, and he was bringing in new leaders. And there were a lot of people on the team, though, that had been there for 20 years, their
Hmm.
entire career. And so talked to everybody about what their hopes were for the
Hmm.
next 5 years for the Transplant Institute and what it meant to them and what they thought it meant to the community. I did a bunch of focus groups with the physicians, and I did town halls with the staff and individual meetings with the senior leaders. And at the beginning of 2019, we put out a new mission and vision statement, which really, I think, crystallized
Hmm.
into words what a lot of people had been hoping for. And we still use those statements today. And the mission or the shared purpose is to improve, extend, and save the lives of people with advanced organ disease, reflective of the fact that transplant programs not only transplant people, but take care of cirrhotics. They take care of advanced heart failure patients and patients with advanced lung disease. And some of those people don't need transplant. Some of those people aren't candidates for transplant. But our grounded purpose really was to be the place in the community that took care of those sickest patients. And our vision that we articulated at that time was to be the best, largest, and first choice for transplantation in America. And that cheer that you heard from Tampa when the data were released at the beginning of January was a reflection of the fact that there's so much pride that we've been able to go on this journey together. So many people have dedicated their careers and such a significant part of their lives to taking care of a population of about 4.5 million people on the west coast of Florida that really don't have another academic medical center to go to.
It's really incredible, and I love the mission around really looking transplant as a tool, not the only tool, but a tool in the care of patients with end stage organ failure, and looking at it in such a comprehensive view, but also with the view it is a very effective tool. So we want to be able to provide it wherever we can, and I think that's really incredible. How so you've gone on this journey, and again, congratulations. That was a really exciting moment, and I think it has to be incredibly fulfilling after setting a vision so many years before to seeing it fulfilled. Um, I can't I imagine, it didn't happen overnight. You don't just snap your fingers and achieve something like that. What were some of the challenges, either administrative or organizationally, in terms of or leadership wise, to go from where you were to this moment?
So I think it starts with culture,
Yeah.
right? And what are the values of the organization? How does the transplant program fit into um, the strategic plan?
Mhm.
And then aligning the team around what the mission and vision really are.
Mhm.
And as you can imagine, there are some people that very rapidly embrace that. They've been
Right.
waiting for it, and
Right.
and I certainly found that there were a lot of people that had been waiting for a direction
Right.
and were very passionate about putting their time and their energy into being engaged with that new direction. And then there's a whole bunch of people you got to persuade, right?
Right. Right. Absolutely.
So as a new person on the team, as a new leader on the team, I had to show up in a way that um, that convinced people that I was for real.
Right.
Because
Right.
people were skeptical. I had spent 10 years in LA,
Mhm.
and so maybe they thought a certain thing about me. Um, so I had to be credible. I had to not only talk the talk, but walk the walk of the community matters to me. Uh, what we're trying to accomplish here matters to me, and that I'm going to treat people with the respect that they deserve. I'm going to value the expertise that was here before I arrived, which is
Mhm.
critical. And that took several years, frankly. And even though we saw an uptick in growth pretty quickly, um, all of the pieces didn't come together for about half a dozen years.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I can imagine. It's got to be uh, quite a lot of work, and I think it's true. Change management is challenging, but I think your point of valuing, there's a lot of expertise, a lot of perspective. You can't do it by yourself. So valuing and hearing out all of these different viewpoints, so critical to get people pulling in the same direction, and especially as you said, when your mission is in some a public good, it's serving a
Hmm.
community. How do we serve this population of patients where this is really the leading option for them in the area? So additionally, sort of in this vision and or to implement this vision, you've been quite innovative and a thought leader in terms of innovation, technology, right? You can want to do something, but then you start to need the tools to achieve those things. Can you talk a little bit about how you look at there's a lot going on in transplant right now. What's exciting, and what are some of the ways you've taken an approach to innovation in terms of growing this program?
So, for the vast majority of my early career, nothing happened in transplantation.
Yeah.
Right, the system had been established in the '80s and did not look markedly different in the 2000 and the early 2010s. We're doing things very similarly, and yeah, there have been some changes in the allocation schema over that period of time, and maybe there had been some incremental growth over a long period of time. But I think my arrival in Tampa and this inflection point in preservation and perfusion technology um, coincided in a way that allowed us to take advantage of it.
Hmm.
We had the support of the institution, which is critically important because I like to say that the playbook in transplantation and growing a high quality, high volume program is fairly standard, and it doesn't take a lot of insight in order to figure it out. It's all in the execution, right?
Right.
So it is the construction of a team that is able to function very highly and in a coordinated and collaborative way. And then it's having the resources from the institution to do that. And that's support from the board, it's support from the CEO, and it's support from the frontline staff
Hmm.
to be aligned with it. And all of those things came together at this magical moment where new technologies were coming out in transplant, and we were able to embrace them, adopt them whole scale, and transform the program in a moment of quite a bit of risk but we found the opportunities in those risks.
Absolutely. You touched on something there that I think is quite interesting in the transplant space, especially. But I think throughout medicine, as you move from the attending surgeon doing the work to a leader who has to start to work with the leadership of the hospital and the C-suite of the hospital and get support for initiatives and things like that, understand financial solvency of a program. All of a sudden, there's different skill sets that you really need to take advantage of and employ. Can you speak to like that change, that transition in your career from o- not only doing surgeries, but surgeries, transplant surgery is incredibly complex, but also then being able to interface in these other new areas for you.
Yeah, so I think for the physicians that are interested and talented and um, have a vision of what they can contribute beyond the direct patient care, you have to become expert at those other components,
Right.
right? One, I think you have to meaningfully invest in leadership as a skill, right? I spent 10 years, between 5 years of general surgery, 3 years of research fellowship at the NIH, and 2 years in transplant training at UCLA, become an expert liver transplant
Yeah.
surgeon, or at least claim some
Yeah.
expertise. Um, and I had to go through a journey where I learned how to be a leader as well, and that is not only understanding some of the nuts and bolts of healthcare leadership, like reading a P&L or understanding contract structures, or understanding a strategic plan and how to formulate that. But it's really about the personal traits that make an effective leader and understanding who you are and how you want to project yourself.
Hmm.
And that is just as hard work as training to be a liver transplant surgeon. I will tell you, and as many moments of frustration and tears in training as in developing the skills to be a good leader, because there are plenty of setbacks from an administrative standpoint, and having the fortitude to deal with that is very much akin to
Yeah.
going through your surgical training and your early years as an attending, where you might have a bad outcome and you have to grow from that.
Hmm.
So I would encourage physicians to develop those skills, value those skills. Try not to be cynical about our administrative partners and what value they bring
Yeah.
to the enterprise.
Absolutely. And it's critical to have their support, especially when you're looking at investing in an institute and technology and growing a program, but also understand their constraints in terms of effective care. We got to be able to implement healthcare in a way that is sustainable and can continue to grow the program, which I think is some of the real innovation. And I'm curious, as you've grown the program, uh, it's at this moment, as you said, a whole bunch of innovative technologies are coming in, but also at the moment of a whole lot of disruption to the allocation systems. We're now looking at much longer distances being first almost a requirement, but now it seems if you have the right tools and the right mindset, that's actually potentially an advantage. Now you can serve your patient community from a much larger pool. Can you talk a little bit about how the dynamics, especially in the last few years, are shifting and how you approach it not of a position of fear of change, but actually embracing change and looking for the opportunity in change?
So if the older I get, the further back I go back in time when I start a story. So if you go back to 1984 and the National Organ Transplant Act, there was the declaration that organs are actually a national resource, not a
Right.
local resource. Well, it took about 4 decades to catch up with that
Right.
idea,
Right. True.
right? So a lot of the early allocation schemes were built around the fact that there was a limited amount of cold ischemic time, which therefore drove a certain distance that you could accept an organ. Um, and on the cusp of an era where that actually is not meaningfully important
Right.
longer.
Right.
And so some of the story of the last half dozen years for us is figuring out how to really cast a broad net for organs and utilize the technologies that are now available that have never been available before, um, to apply our clinical philosophy of the utilization of imperfect organs and the selection of the recipient that could best take advantage of them. So we have, especially in the liver transplant program, adopted machine perfusion and now advanced hypothermic preservation with the liver guard. And I was just telling Lisa Anderson, the CEO of Paragonix, this story about what we're doing to travel long distances was unimaginable even a couple of years ago. And since January 1, we've taken 3 livers from Los Angeles,
That's incredible.
and which really gives me great joy since I trained there. But they were organs that were not going to be utilized, and so by using the technology, by really understanding what the limits are, because the historical limits on cold ischemic time for livers was around 6 to 8 hours. People would start
Right,
getting
right.
nervous if it took longer than about 8 hours to get a liver in, and certainly you wouldn't plan
Hmm.
to take longer than 8 hours. And sometimes that
Yeah,
would
yeah.
happen because of various complexities with the recipient or what have you. But now we're a 100% machine perfusion program, and we give ourselves about 12 hours to get from cross clamping the donor to on normothermic machine perfusion. And 12 hours is a luxury, right? You can do a lot of things with that 12 hours, not only go farther, but consider new modes of transportation and have really the opportunity to practice in a less anxious environment.
Right.
Transplant has been so high pressure because the clock is ticking all the time that I think it drove a certain behavior,
Yeah.
a pattern within transplant surgeons that now we're trying to undo very
Yeah.
actively. And for example, we have not done a nighttime liver transplant since September 22nd of 2023. So we're coming up on 2 years of
Right.
all daytime liver transplants. And I think it's probably added an extra year to my life,
Right. Right.
frankly,
Right. Right.
because I get to sleep through the night. My partners get to sleep through the night. And we get to make more rational decisions. We get to be more normal human beings. And fundamentally, I think that makes us more creative and it makes us less risk averse because when you're tired and you're stressed, you don't want to accept the organ that's coming from California or the marginal organ that's coming from down the street. Um, but now, with a different paradigm of how we function that is predicated on the technologies,
Right. Right.
we're able to do something really different. And it comes from my partners knowing that I meaningfully value their well being so
Yeah.
that we can take excellent care of patients.
I mean, I think this is such a great point. This shift is incredibly impactful, and I'm curious, even from a recruiting more surgeons to be part of this space, to be able to make transplant not something where it's you can either have a personal life or do transplant. But you could potentially be a great transplant surgeon and still have some work life balance. That's a big shift, I would imagine.
Yeah. Is that the camera? I have 2 open positions if people are looking for jobs and want to join the team. Um, yeah, I think it does open up a lot of possibilities. Many of our trainees were discouraged from doing transplant because of the perception that it was a really demanding field personally, and might put some of your other priorities about having aspirations outside of work, about having a family and committing to your family. I think a lot of people were turned off by that,
Right.
frankly. And now I have the opportunity to entice our residents into
Hmm.
thinking about a career in transplantation because um, there aren't so many compromises.
Right.
And what I want fundamentally is for talented young people to be as excited about the profession that I have chosen as I am.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there, in many ways, and you'll see it, I think, sometimes in the discourse, particularly around the policy around transplant, of the concern of transplant policy and the constraints of transplant being a zero sum game. Either we go long distances or we get good outcomes. Either we have short times or we have work life balance, right? It's all of this zero sum game, and you can't. It's always going to be coming at the cost of one option over the other. Either you have improved preservation or you have a cost effective transplant. Um, and what I love about sort of your view and your approach and some of the work that you're doing is with the right tools, it doesn't necessarily need to be zero sum. The world of every other space in our lives, every other technology, when you evolve to new capabilities, new learnings in the space, now you can do both things. And I think I see that in your program, especially about how we can potentially employ new techniques, new approaches, and reduce remove the zero sum aspect of it.
Yeah, because those sound like challenges, right?
Right.
And hurdles to overcome. One of the things that has driven the transplant mindset is scarcity,
Right.
and the scarcity of organs,
Hmm.
meaning that the number of people that could benefit from transplantation has been limited. And the most difficult thing as a transplant professional is to be the one adjudicating whether
Right.
a patient is a good candidate or not.
Hmm.
And I fundamentally want to take that out of my job description,
Right.
right? I want to be able to look at a patient and say that their best therapeutic option is transplant, and we are going to figure out how to get them transplanted. And we intentionally talked about moving from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset in our program.
Interesting.
And we did this at the beginning of 2023. And we had been restricting access to the waitlist for liver transplant to patients who had MELD score over 15.
Right.
And there's a historical paper back from the 2000s, Bob Marion and the team that was running SRTR at that time said that the threshold for survival benefit for liver transplant was at a MELD score of 15.
Mhm.
So nearly 20 years later, we're still using that number, even though the post transplant survival had improved by almost 10% in those 20 years.
Which is incredible.
Right. So if you look at the newer literature, if you use MELD score as the cutoff, it's somewhere more like 11 or 12.
Mhm.
So what we did is we eliminated the lower threshold for MELD score in our listing philosophy. We said if somebody had life-threatening complications of liver disease, we're not going to presume that they won't benefit from transplant at a lower score. Well, it took a little while for that philosophy to marinate, that idea that we were going to find everybody in our community that could benefit from transplant, and then it was going to be the obligation of the transplant surgeons and the rest of the team to find organs for them. Well, we went from a listing about 200 patients in a year to last year we listed 375 patients, which means we're making a meaningful dent in the community need.
Absolutely.
And then we did 279 transplants. So um, I think that it's that shift in mindset. And my job as the leader is to articulate it, to
Absolutely.
explain the why, and people were skeptical. They weren't certain that we were actually going to find livers for lower MELD patients, or that there was a value in amplifying the work to the degree that was necessary of the team in order to find these patients, evaluate them, and list them. But it is paying off, and if the measure is that we're getting closer to meeting the need in the community, then that's the most meaningful success, right? Because people are living, people are not suffering with liver disease for as
Right.
long. They're going back to their families, their jobs, and to the things that bring them joy. And um, fundamentally, I think that's what my role here is.
That's beautifully put, and I think it's so true, especially in liver transplant, because uh, of all the solid organs, it's the most difficult to artificially replace. In fact, impossible. And at least with the technology we have today, and so reducing that time to transplant when you're not being able to live life to the fullest and give more quality of life days back to patients. I think at the end of the day, that's the goal. It's not to do a procedure; it's to change a life for a recipient.
Yeah, and the quality measures that we use don't adequately capture suffering,
Right.
right?
Right.
And People with a MELD score in the mid-teens suffer a lot,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
um, and they're not able to lead their fullest and best lives, and so there is a great deal of value
Mhm.
for them as individuals to get transplanted earlier rather than wait till they're sick in the ICU and near death and are going to have a weeks or even months long hospital course that is going to be fraught with danger for them, fraught with pain for their families. So we're trying to do something really different. And as a result, since that shift in philosophy, our median MELD score has gone down by about 6 points.
Oh, fantastic. That's really exciting. And can I ask a little bit, going back to some of the changes in transplant, and your expansion of your philosophy? One of the big changes was that transplant went from a very local on a relationship basis, a very local experience. Like you said, organs didn't come from very far, and so there would be one or two organ procurement organizations a transplant center would really work with, right? And now, uh, s- specifically in terms of the approach you're taking livers all the way from California. The number, can you speak to me about the change importance of relationships with many OPOs and procurement organizations? How does that change in the modern era for you?
Yeah, this has been one of the fundamental ills in the system, which is that OPOs have been driven by different standards and different metrics than transplant centers, and it has put us at odds.
Hmm.
People who fundamentally want to do the same good as
Right?
us,
Yeah.
right? Like as a transplant surgeon and an OPO leader, we want to honor the gift of donated organs, and we want to use that gift to save people's lives. But there has for much of the history of transplantation in this country been a contentious relationship because the measures weren't aligned, maybe the cultures were different within OPOs and within transplant centers. And I think it is incumbent on us to break down those misunderstandings and to better align. Whether the metrics are going to do it for us
Hmm.
is a hotly contested issue. But regardless, if I take the perspective of an OPO and as a transplant center leader say, I want to understand what the barriers are in your business to getting more organs available for transplant, and I'd like to partner with you on reducing those barriers. So I can give you a really specific example.
Hmm.
The negotiated time of organ recovery
All right.
has always been one of those points of great friction
Right.
between transplant centers and OPOs because OPOs have their operational concerns around when is an OR available at a donor hospital, when are our teams capable of going to the donor hospital and recovering the organs, and then what's the interplay between all the various teams,
Right.
lung, heart, liver, abdominal recovery, and what is being negotiated.
Yeah.
And so what I've said to the OPOs that we're deeply partnered with is we won't fight you on time.
Right.
Whenever it is convenient for you to go, that is going to maximize your organs available for transplant. Go then. We will adjust. I tell you that one statement has transformed my relationship with multiple OPOs. So I'll break the fourth wall again.
Mhm.
If there are OPO leaders out there listening, we are attuned to your needs.
Which is critical. It's critical to be able to, because it is this orchestration. And anyone who's either been a staff member of a hospital or even a patient of a hospital knows timing of things can be challenging to orchestrate for a single procedure in a single hospital. And now you're talking about a procedure that is done in one donor hospital that is potentially trying to sync up timing with 5 hospitals around the country in different states. This is really difficult, a really challenging task for the people who are leading that. And if you can relieve that constraint, that has to be really impactful to the relationship and the coordination.
Yeah, so that took effort on our part,
Hmm.
right? And I think in order to build a trusting partnership, you have to make that effort without the expectation of reward
Hmm.
immediately,
Right, right, right.
right? If you find people that share your values, then it's worth the expended resources to listen to what their concerns are and try to address them.
Mhm.
And because of that, we've got some great OPO partners where I think we're meaningfully aligned in not only our strategies but in our values, um, and some days we're not able to take organs
Yeah.
from them.
Yep.
And I just tell them directly rather than play a game. I say we are overcommitted for the next 24 to 48 hours.
Right.
So this organ that we would normally take, we can't take today.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they appreciate that because then they move on and they do their next best option for organ placement. But I think this is how I approach partnership in general, whether it's in OPO transplant center relationships, whether it's in the relationships that we've had with the technology companies that we're deeply partnered with, and that includes Paragonix, is that when we find people who share our values and that are willing to invest and commit to a relationship without the expectation that it is transactional,
Mhm.
uh, then that really sets free the ideas that can be shared, the risks that can be taken together. Um, and that has been part of the really fun thing over the last couple of years is this relationship building stuff. And in fact, I would say that what I've learned as a leader in my job has helped me in the rest of my life too, because I can see these very tangible benefits to these behaviors in my profession, and have allowed that to spill in the other direction into better relationships in my life. And I think that's been an unexpected benefit.
And in this space, it's really nice to have that when you find great partners that have shared values of wanting to make the space better and improve things and improve this therapy for transplant recipients, for donors, and donor families, and very importantly, the patients on the wait list suffering from end stage disease. I think that's absolutely critical. And I think one of the areas that's really important, because the outcomes are so long term, is in research and in science. And so you have a background from the NIH, and now you're leading as the national PI of the Guardian Registry. Can you speak a little bit about how the interplay, because things are moving fast right now, I feel like in space, the importance of continuing to invest in research and move understanding of organ preservation and transplantation forward.
Oh gosh, we're in a tough moment, right?
Yeah.
As a society, are we going to invest in leading the world in new knowledge
Hmm.
and the innovation that comes from new knowledge, and then the impact on the patient?
Right.
Um, I hope this is a blip.
Yep.
I've been a science nerd my entire life, and that's why. I mean, instead of like working a fun summer job, I ran electrophoresis gels in the lab when I was a high school student. So like, this has been part of who I am. Really,
You weren't lifeguarding or scooping ice cream.
nope. um, I was not, but I was learning that science is hard,
Yeah.
science is fraught with failure, and that it takes a persistence and a determination to really make a new discovery.
Right.
And I was in the lab for 3 years at the NIH and working on tolerance induction.
Hmm.
And the funny thing is, um, I'm not sure that we're much further along in that conversation.
Right.
But even without the holy grail being discovered in transplant, the scientific journey of tolerance induction has led to meaningful impact on patient care, with the development of new therapies and strategies of immunosuppression. So if you look at the current moment and where the opportunities are to develop new knowledge, it's in the transformation of the utilization of organ preservation perfusion technology, because there are still a lot of unknowns.
Right.
I think we're getting very close to the point where we can say definitively that it works and
Mhm.
it works really well, and have the duration of data collection that really proves that out. And now is the opportunity to answer some whys and hows that even further accelerate the impact of the technology.
I do feel like there's a moment right now where it's there's so much going on in all of you lead an institute that has all different solid organ transplantation, and there's so much learning, and I think that's the beautiful thing of the scientific community is there's so many minds working at new challenges, new problems, but I do think it's important to bring them together, and one of the things we're doing here at Paragonix is our new Paragonix Transplant Research Institute, where we're trying to bring more cross-functional groups together, both on the basic science all the way up to sort of the implementation and clinical operations. And you're one of the members taking part of that. Can you talk about sort of the what's going on in transplant in terms of how the different organ verticals can learn from each other?
So I think certainty is inversely proportional to experience.
Right.
And so the older I get and the more experience I have, the less certain I am about what the right answer is. And the way to combat that uncertainty is to surround yourself by people who are really smart
Right. I
and
agree with that.
not only smart, but might have a different perspective on the same problem as you.
Absolutely.
And so I'm really fortunate in running the Transplant Institute at Tampa General Hospital that I have access to these really big brains like Lucian Lozonsky, who runs our heart transplant program, or Gunders Katlaps, who is the surgical director of the lung transplant program, Anthony Watkins, who is the kidney director. Like these are people who are all coming at the same problem from slightly different directions because of the constraints put on them by the organ that they are expert in. But we have a dialogue in the Transplant Institute where we share ideas across organs, across the diaphragm. And so this opportunity with Paragonix, I think, is really exciting because I'm going to meet some experts that I don't know yet and that are going to have something to teach me. And I can't wait to learn from them.
Truly, I think there's so much opportunity. I always feel there's the space for innovation particularly comes out when you have people from different experiences and different backgrounds, right? You know, you'll have a problem on one side and somebody who has solved problems in a different sort of area, and you bring them together and you find that there's opportunity and learnings that can come across, and sometimes it's somewhere in the middle that neither side has ever thought of before. And I think there's just a really exciting aspect to science and the scientific community that way.
Yeah, and I think if you're trying to have disruptive thoughts, this is really helpful,
Yeah.
right? So when you play in the same sandbox with the same kids all the time, the sandcastles look the same.
Right. 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 Right.
So if you go out of your comfort zone, if you're willing to stretch your thoughts to see how the insights that others have found might be applicable for you, I think there's great one, there's great fun in that,
Yeah.
and two, I think that we can accelerate the learning in this moment about how preservation and perfusion technologies are going to continue to accelerate the transformation of transplant in this country.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Dr. Dhanireddy, thank you so much for coming by, visiting our headquarters, and really appreciate seeing you anytime.
This podcast thing suits you. You should take it up as a more permanent gig. Thanks for having me, Michael.
Well, it's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun. And thank you all for joining.